Hello everyone, Dr. Brian Scott with you. We're getting ready to close out this week. This is the second week in January 2024. It's hard to imagine that we're moving along so quickly. Sure glad to have you with us today. This is Insight to the End Times. We are looking at where we might be on God's end time calendar. And we know from what Jesus spoke in Matthew 24, he made it very clear. He also did the same thing in Acts chapter 1. He said, it's not for you to know the exact time or the exact season when this will come to pass. But he also said in Matthew 24, when he was asked a question by his disciples, what are the signs of your return and what are the signs of the end of the age? He gave answers. And we've been examining those answers in the early part of Matthew chapter 24, verses 6 and 7. He talks about wars and rumors of wars, which we've already studied earlier this week. And he talked about nation coming against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And he also talked about some physical things like famines, pestilence, and earthquakes. We've examined most of these items. Today we're looking at kingdom versus kingdom. And it's very interesting that not only is this going to be military issues, but it's going to be issues that rise up in the field of politics, the economies, finances, etc. And I want to bring some thoughts to you today that you may or may not be aware of, because some of this gets reported and some of it doesn't. And this is the thing that has changed drastically in our society today, is we don't just get news presented to us, we get news that they want us to get, but it's not necessarily all the news that's there. So there are some economic and financial pressures coming of a significant nature in 2024. And I say that from this position. If you have been doing any research in this realm or any reading in this realm, you may be aware of a group known as BRICS, B-R-I-C-S. This is a group or a league of nations that have come together to work together, and they're called BRICS, B-R-I-C-S. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they've grouped together to begin formulating policies and agreements and trade agreements and so on, so they're not as necessarily dependent on the United States. Now, they just recently held a conference in the summer of 2023, and in that conference, they added 6 additional nations. This is really quite interesting. They added, let me read these to you. They added Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, or the United Arab Emirates. Now, these additional countries effectively joined BRICS as of January 1st, 2024. And in so doing, now we've got a league of 27 nations. That is very significant because now they wield a great deal of power. Now, I'm going to postulate a little bit. I believe this is mostly accurate, but we haven't seen much yet to know this for sure. But for many, many years now, there was an agreement signed between the United States and, say, Saudi Arabia, the oil-producing nations there that form OPEC, that the United States would provide them protection and military arms and so on, munitions, in exchange for their oil being traded in U.S. dollars. So the U.S. dollar became the petrodollar. I'm very much simplifying this matter. As a result, all the oil that's produced in the OPEC nations in the Middle East, it's traded around the world in U.S. dollars. That made the U.S. dollar the reserve currency of the world. And that simply means that whenever international trade is conducted, it basically is based on the U.S. dollar. That's why the U.S. dollar vis-a-vis exchange rates around the world is so important. In the year 2011, that goes back about 12 or 13 years ago now, the Canadian dollar was very strong, and it traded almost exactly at par with the U.S. dollar. In fact, there were several days when the Canadian dollar was slightly stronger than the U.S. dollar. Today's not that situation. Today, the Canadian dollar's worth about 73 cents vis-a-vis the U.S. dollar. Well, these nations, the BRIC nations coming together, are looking at being able to exchange goods and services using different currency, excluding the U.S. dollar from the currency transactions. This may or may not have significance in your thinking or in your understanding, but suffice it to say, the U.S. dollar represents trillions and trillions of dollars of trade in the U.S. dollar, which gives the U.S. dollar tremendous strength around the world. If they start working in a separate currency, whether it be a Russian ruble or a Chinese yuan, Y-U-A-N, or an Indian rupee, we're looking at a massive change in the economic fortunes and financial conditions of the world. We don't know where this is going to go yet. We'll have to watch it. But it is going to probably end up pitting this group of nations against the United States and the allies that the United States has. In addition to all of that, we have tremendous protests occurring in our continent, in our nation of Canada, for instance, against fossil fuels. We have some of the greatest fossil fuel deposits in the entire world, and yet we have a government and protesters who will not let up. And so we have a green movement that is so strong in Canada, it's shutting everything down. Climate change has become the order of the day for our government. And as a result, pipelines are being shut down. The oil industry is being shut off. It's being strangled. It's one of our greatest natural resources here in Canada. In other words, Canada can't survive economically on a national scale or international scale when they go in this direction. And we got so much hatred going on in our world today. It's really escalated since the pandemic occurred. Not only that, it's now on a whole new wavelength because of the Israeli invasion attack against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. It's coming almost to the point of physical blows. And some of the threats that are being made are massive, and they're going untouched. We've had protesters standing in the face of police officers telling the police officers, we're going to put you, or I'm going to put you 6 feet under. That is a threat that should immediately result in an arrest. But no, they just let it pass. And we're seeing such horrendous shifts and changes. Really haven't seen these things since the Vietnam War protests in the 1960s. So the point is simply this. When Jesus prophesied nation coming against nation and kingdom against kingdom, I don't want you just to think in terms of a nation like Canada coming against the United States or against Peru or against Mexico or Iceland or some other nation. I want you to see that it pertains to groups, people, ways of thinking coming against other ways of thinking, oppression, putting people down, demanding change occur against everyone's thinking. We're going to deal with this a little bit more next week, but this is becoming an all-out war, yet it's not called that. And people are just saying, what can we do about it? We can't do anything about it. Jesus said these are signs of the end. These are signs of the end. And we have to be aware, this is part of the Antichrist spirit that is arising up in the land. Folks, we're close, and we're getting closer. We've got one more session this week. I'll see you tomorrow. Amen.